big profit. This was called the pool system. Now, in this system, the middlemen had a higher advantage because they negotiated with the farmers independently of each other. So Nigerian youth movement was the first to bring cocoa cooperatives, and they were the first to fight for minimum wages. So at that point, for labor, you had they forced the government to make a law that no laborer must be given less than 2 penny per day. So they greatly influenced the foundation of the first labor unions of the time. And the labor unions would also play a very powerful role in liberation struggles, not only in Nigeria, but also in many parts of Africa. Two of such unions then was the Railway Union, which really played a big role in strikes and all that in Nigeria at that time, and the Miners Union, which of course led to the Enugu coal mine. That was all the Nigerian youth movement. So you can see that these guys were firebrand, and these are energies that are missing in Nigeria today. If we have people with the same spirits of our ancestors, immediate ancestors in Nigeria today, by now these politicians will not be messing with us the way they are. But unfortunately, their kind of spirit is rare. Everybody is hungry, people are suffering, so everybody is on more or less on survival mode. So it doesn't help to have this kind of mindset going around. So now, one of the world tensions at that time was Germany's insistence that, when they were dividing Africa, Germany did not get a good share of Africa, and even the little that got good share, the little share they got, it was taken from them after World War One. Like I said much earlier, in Europe, the major blocs that had the biggest share of Africa were Belgium, England, and France. Belgium held the major part of the center of Africa, controlling its major rainforest and one of the richest lands in mineral resources. Then the French and English had all of North and West Africa. England had the most of Southern Africa, and it shared a less portion of it with the Portuguese, who had Angola. And Germany was totally ostracized from the share of the continent at the time. Germany was also building an industrial base like other European countries, and it also needed raw materials. So after the First World War, the little colony that they had that was taken from them made them very angry. This was one of the reasons for their aggression towards other Europeans during the Nazi invasions. Now, to stop Hitler from invading England, the Prime Minister at that time organized an appeasement policy in which he was having discussions to hand over Nigeria to Germany. And this news got to Nigerian youth movement, and they went on a big campaign to stop it. So, of course, the British government denied it and immediately stopped all kind of arrangements to have that kind of negotiation. So this was clearly written in one of the autobiographies of Obafemi Awolowo, but because of time, I won't go into the readings, maybe on another future date. But these were the things that were going on, that the Nigerian youth movement was doing, that was making them to be a very big headache. Now, when the British government started to clamp down on transport union in 13, I think it was in 1937. In the 1930s, yeah. So because the transport system was frustrating the railway system, and they wanted the railway system to be viable so that they can use it to bring raw materials from the north to the coast, so that they can use it for export. At that time, Obafemi Awolowo, the sage of Yoruba people, was a member of the Nigerian youth movement and also the secretary of the Motor Transport Union. So most of you that usually abuse MC Oluomo, I hope you would give the man some respect if you realize that even the sage Awolowo at some point was one of the leaders of the transport union. So it was Awolowo who led the Southwest transport strike, and this really kind of frustrated the British government. And so you can see how Nigerian youth movement was really, really big on helping to kind of make sure that the British did not oppress them. So it grew over the years and was embraced by the wider people. So it grew so strong that for the first time in the history of Nigeria, An organization was able to successfully wrestle with Macaulay and displace his party in elections. This was the progress and momentum of the party before Nnamdi Azikiwe showed up. Now, there are a few things that set Nnamdi Azikiwe apart from the other people. Nnamdi Azikiwe studied in the United States. This was the only part of the world at that time where blacks stood up to white people. There's no other part of the world where, so you know that when he was there, the civil rights movement was going on and all that. So African Americans greatly understood how to resist racial dominance. So Azikiwe came back to Nigeria understanding the power of the media in agitation, and he himself was a super gifted orator. If you go online and listen to Azikiwe speak and all that, you'll be really impressed. He has a very good mastery of English. He has a very good, fiery voice, and he knows how to arouse and inspire people. So the rhetoric in North America at that time was Pan-Africanism. Reason being that most of the blacks that have been taken to America, they were a people who had lost their identity. So they don't know what it is to be Madinka. They don't know what it is to be Igbos. They don't know what it is to be Yorubas. So they only knew what it is to be black people under oppression. And they realized that we just have to fight as black people. These were part of the things that Zeke was bringing back to Africa. Unfortunately, that was a square peg in a round hole, because you will never get a Yoruba man, a strong, self-aware Yoruba man, to give up his Yoruba identity because he's black. And never would you get an Igbo man to do that because he's black as well. There's no part of the world in Africa where people that are connected to their sociocultural roots will ever give it up in the name of blackness. That could work in a place like America, because they don't know better, but it can't work in a place of like Africa. This is why Pan-Africanism remains a very, very dangerous stuff. Host, I want to catch my breath and quickly take a cup of water, if you don't mind. So,
Thank you very much. Yeah, I will just speak a bit about this Pan-Africanism stuff, because recently we even had I think we had a room about it. I think for more than 12 hours or so on Clubhouse. So the idea is that, I've heard a lot of people, come to the internet and compare Nigeria to United States and say, why don't we all come together, Pan-Africanism and all that. But then I do ask them some questions like, okay, US is racially classified. There is a kind of white against the black, right? Scots, Irish, whatever they are, when they come to US, they become white people. No, nothing like it's white, right? Against the black. And these people, who you call the black people, the people of color, they were taken from this planet, this continent to that area. They already lost their ethnic consciousness, their ethnic classification. So what they need to, their own kind of unity point of view, how to unite themselves, is based on the blackness, the melanin. So they had to fight against the whites, the other racial group that is oppressing them. But in the case of Africa, we don't have anything like blackness in Africa, especially in West Africa. We don't have blackness. What we have is ethnic classification. Before even the Europeans came, some African groups were fighting against another African groups, right? There were even some elements of this so-called Pan-Africanism in our own part of the world, even though it's not that kind of black, let's just all be black, this kind of black stuff, because there were even times that Oyo had like military alliance with Bariba against another African group, which is the Ilori invaders with the Fulani and the rest. So we can see that it is just the kind of Pan-Africanism. I can't call it Pan-Africanism. Like the kind of alliance we had in pre-colonial Africa was not even that kind of based on our skin. It's based on interest, it's based on ethnicity, it's based on alliance. Some group of people, like in the case of Oyo and Bariba, they would form alliance, I mean mutual alliance, to displace other African group. Another African group, like the battle of Atakpame, the Oyo people, the I think Mr. Bunkaide, can you remind me the people Oyo form alliance with against the what's the name of these people? The oh God, I've forgotten the name now.
Yeah, so the Battle of Atakpame was not actually an Oyo war. It was a Dahomey war against the people of Ghana, the Ashanti people. So,
the Ashanti. No.
Yeah.
But actually, I read a source that said
gave military support to Dahomey.
Yeah,
but it wasn't really an Oyo war. Yeah.
It's actually a group. Is it the Akan people or so?
Yes.
I've forgotten that kind of.
Yes. So it was fought in Atakpame. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just what we have in Africa is not blackness. It's ethnic groups, fighting for resources, and it doesn't this kind of notion or belief that another African group cannot dominate another African group is nonsense. Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's rubbish. African group can suppress, an African group can suppress, even colonize another African group. We have seen cases like that. So the case of bringing Pan-Africanism into West Africa is kind of very, even the concept of continents, some people will tell you Africa. Like, I will ask them, before the word Africa, what's the name of Africa in Yoruba? Because even the continental classification of the word was alien to us. It came with colonialism. We didn't know this part of the world. I mean, this place, this map, to be called Africa as Yoruba people. No, we didn't. Even the River Niger, the one they call, in Yoruba they call it Odoya. Hausa call it Kwara. Igbo call it another name. We have different names for the same maybe river that we share or this thing. So there is this kind of, we should always know that pre-colonial place now called Africa is different from this post-colonial one, and we don't need to mix everything up. I think that's one of the mistakes that Zeke actually, when he went to US, he got this Pan-Africanism idea, and because the British were here and all that, he just thought like, oh, let's just form this kind of blackness kind of group, discarding our differences of ethnicity. And that's what we bet this this mantra now in Nigeria, where they will tell you, forget about your ethnicity, forget about your tribe, forget about your language, just come together and all that. It can't work that way. You need to recognize the differences and know your boundaries, get mutual, kind of respect, mutual maybe agreement or alliance or something. So that's what I would just try to add. Are you back, sir, Mr. Gunka? Hello, Mr. Gunka?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much. So thank you very much for that. That was a good addition. So, like, as we were saying, when Zeke came back, Pan-Africanism worked very well in a place called Haiti. And you see, the people of Haiti were able to blend a lot of African cultures into what you call a Creole social order. They were able to kind of take the Ghana culture, Nigerian culture. Okay, it wasn't Nigeria at that time.
Voodoo, even their spirituality.
Yes. Oh, so those are syncretized cultures. So they will look at the Congo man, look at the Ashanti man, look at the Yoruba man, take all their spiritualities and then kind of mix it together to create a new social order. So this new culture became superior to the different individuals' cultures of all the slaves there. So this was now the culture that united all of them together. So that's part of the things that Marcus Garvey had in mind if his plan had successfully come true. Because Marcus Garvey wanted everybody to go back to Africa, and he wanted Africa to become a melting pot culture, something like what happened in Haiti. Now, this was an idea many Afro-Americans wanted to experiment in Africa. And one of the leading advocates then also was Zeke himself. Although Zeke did not think of it as an Afro-American, he thought of it more like they can have Pan-Africanism, but it will be Africans that are at the forefront, not Afro-Americans. And one of his two of his disciples that tapped into the philosophy were Nyerere of Tanzania and Nkrumah of Ghana, and much later Patrice Lumumba of they started to tap into that philosophy, and it caused them more harm than good. It was what led to all their falls in their various countries, because it led to ethnic tensions, and people started to feel like they were trying to create a racial superior order, and they didn't like that, you know. So his rhetoric and philosophy was high on the streets at the time. So although at the time he had been, Marcus Garvey had been disgraced and turned back to America, I also want us to know that these guys, Marcus Garvey and all that, they've always been famous in Africa, even before people like Zeke went to America to study. People have always read about them. People have known about the Haiti Revolution. People have always celebrated these people long before Zeke came back. But Zeke was the one that brought back that kind of philosophy and made it very popular in Nigeria. People usually believe that Zeke embraced Pan-Africanism while in America. But in actual fact, Marcus Garvey greatly influenced him before he left for America. His exposure to Garvey, you call it Garveyism, it started when he was in Calabar in the early 1920s. His writings and rhetoric evolved into one that rated skin color as more important than cultural views. To the Afro-American who has been stripped of his identity, it's understandable to have this mindset, but for someone who comes from a rich culture, as an Igbo culture, it was near sacrilegious to imagine that skin color supersedes shared cultures and values. It is mere stupidity to think that the Igbo man and the Yoruba man is one people. That's madness. It's madness to think that the Fulani man, because he has been around for a long time and his skin is not red anymore, his skin is now black, he's now one with you and me. That is reckless thinking. If you think like that, you're not, if a group of people start to think like that, they're not going to last. They will go into extinction. Serious one. Now, when Nnamdi Azikiwe returned from the States, his exposure was different from the other nationalists. At the time, he was one of the very few who had American education. Nnamdi Azikiwe was the first Igbo man to be a graduate. Before then, many of them were more or less merchants and all that. They weren't exposed to education, unlike your Yoruba people. So his exposure was different from that of other nationalists. He was a very powerful orator, like I said earlier, had a very strong mastery of words. And at the time, he was the most enlightened Igbo man. And he plays a great role in the transition of Igbos into one of the most educated breed of Africans in less than 2 decades. So, I mean, we're not trying to take away from Zeke and his legacy, but we're just trying to pinpoint where the tensions came from between both parts. And one thing that's
Are you there,
hello?
sir?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So you see, before Zeke, Igbos did not speak as one people. They were loosely federated. They were greatly divided, and he was the first that was able to bring them together and make them to speak as one people. And after Zeke, no other leader, not even Ojukwu, has been able to step into that shoes. Nobody has ever been able to get all Igbos to speak with one voice in the same capacity as Zeke at that time. So he was a dominant energy in the Igbo cosmology, the evolution of the Igbos as modern people There's no way it will be spoken, and Zeke will not be spoken about. People usually claim that he loved Nigeria more than his people. This, of course, is far from the truth. That's ridiculous. Like the Nigeria of his dream was one where his people would play a leading role in helping evolve Nigeria and Africa. This is the rhetoric behind his One Nigeria, and these are the sentiments that remain among some of his people, not all of them, till today. And this is what he called the manifest destiny, and that was what he spoke about in his 1939 acceptance speech when he was made president of the Igbo State Union. Now, at the time of Zeke's return, the politician he greatly respected was a man called Macaulay. So it surprised people that he chose to join Nigerian youth movement rather than work with Macaulay. Whatever the reason might be, he was very restless in the party. One thing that kind of greatly upset him was that the most educated people in the Nigerian youth movement were Yoruba people. And as such, he wasn't comfortable with them Africanization of the civil service and all those stuff that they were embarking on. He was asking himself that, okay, if this gets to happen, who are the people that will benefit? Where will my own people be? If they say now, okay, we're going to now Africanize the civil service. I say, yeah, bring the educated people. Then the Yorubas will bring all the educated people. He didn't have no educated Igbo that he was going to bring. That greatly worried him. Another issue was that even though the party was detribalized, the most influential members of the party were Yoruba, and many of them were from the Ijebu region. So not many of his people held a lot of weight in that party. So this was one of the reasons it seemed that he became very antagonistic of the party and constantly denigrated most of his progress made by Yoruba people in that party. Awolowo noted this in his biography, and he usually talked about his discomfort. And I'm going to give me a minute. Let me get Awolowo's book from my library, and then because I want to read one or two things from there. Back to you. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much for everyone. To everyone. So if you want to, you can see the a pin a link I pinned up there. Join if you want to join Think Yoruba First organization. You can go to our website. You see something like this there to sign up. And thank you very much. And also follow us if you are not following us. You can follow our page and also switch on your notification to see any of our tweets. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm back. Can you hear me very well?
Yes, Mr. Bunker.
Yes. So I'm going to read from page 137 of Awolowo's biography. And he said, by the end of August of 1940, I was certain in my own mind that Dr. Azikiwe was not a conscientious member of the Nigerian youth movement, and that for some reason best known to himself, he was bent on destroying this nationalistic movement. At the same time, it seemed clear to me that his policy was to corrode the self-respect of Yoruba people as a group, to build up the Igbos, and to magnify his own contributions to the nationalist struggle, to dwarf and misrepresent the achievements of these contemporaries, and to discount and nullify the humble but sterling quota which older politicians had made in progress. Other incidents which happened thereafter merely went on to strengthen my beliefs. So you can see that that was Awolowo talking, and he was a big member of the Nigerian youth movement. And that was when they started kind of getting very uncomfortable with Zeke's move. But I personally, nobody actually blames him because he was now starting to wonder that, okay, why should I be here? And why should I be doing all this? But then my own people will not benefit from it. Naturally, people gravitated to Zeke. He was very electric he was very electric in a way, very charismatic guy, very lovable. You can't take that from him. He had very super oratory skills and was greatly loved by Yoruba people of the time because Yoruba naturally we get attracted to intellectuals. If someone is a bright mind, Yorubas love the person. It doesn't matter if he's one of them or not. Now, everything being said is to lay the foundation for the feud between him and Awolowo. Both of them turned the issue into a tribal war, and this is one of the things that plagued the southern politics from 1940s up until date. In defense of Awolowo, it could be said that he acted in self-defense of what he perceived as dangerous rhetoric from Zeke. Zeke wanted Igbo people to influence politics, but he knew no magic would happen overnight. So Zeke started to mobilize his people to start studying in the States, and his agitation was what would eventually lead to organizations like American Council on African Education and a partnership with a guy called Horace Bound, who was president of the Lincoln University at that time, so that he can get a lot of his Igbo people to become educated. So the transformation of Igbos from illiterate merchants to educated people had a lot to do with Zeke. Now, as Premier of Eastern Region, his major project was building a university. He greatly understood how education played a very important role in the liberation of people. And at the time of the Nigerian youth movement, he was upset that Yoruba people were far ahead of his people. And it greatly worried him that if the civil service was Africanized at that time, Yoruba people would be the major beneficiaries. Now, the British government at the time was working with Nigerian youth movement and was very responsive to these demands for Africanization. So this was one of the reasons why they opened up the judiciary and started to bring in the qualified natives. But the natives they were bringing were members of the Ogboni court. And so if you know that the Ogboni was an ancient judicial system in Yoruba land, but the Ogboni became the lodges. They call them lodges, and so among them, they were integrated into the Freemason society, and many of them were now kind of indoctrinated into the Western style, and they started getting embraced by the Europeans. One of such people was a prince in Egbaland, whose name was Adetokunbo Ademola. I'm sure we would have heard of his name. His father was the man that Madam Kuti had a problem with those good old days, and he was going to chase him into exile. The man nearly died of hypertension. He had a stroke and nearly died. It was Awolowo that will eventually bring him back and reinstall him as a king, because Madam Kuti it's part of the Zeke and Awolowo feud that made that happen, because Madam Kuti was a Zikist. And so Awolowo used that to spite her, and then they brought him back, and then they used him to frustrate the attempt to make Egba. I am on the phone. I'm on the phone, love. 1 minute. Sorry, my people. That was my daughter. Yeah. Okay. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. So these were all the things that were going on at that time. And Adetokunbo Ademola was nominated as the first magistrate, and Zeke was not happy about it. And he did not hide his displeasure. Oh, he openly argued against his nomination, and this greatly embarrassed the party. So he said that Adetokunbo was not qualified for the post and wrote in his media house that it was not a right decision to appoint him. This was officially the first show of tribalism in the history of Nigeria. And I'm going to read it as well from the I'm going to read it as well from Awolowo's biography. And it says also on page 137 that at the time, Zik created more than a tremor throughout the rank and file of the movement when he wrote editorials in the pilot calling upon the government not to appoint Sir Adetokunbo, then Mr. in bracket, Ademola, a magistrate, as was then strongly rumored. His ground for this was that Sir Adetokunbo had not then had the statutory post-call experience. When the appointment was in fact made, he criticized it on the same ground. This act of his was in diametric opposition to the movement's policy of Africanization of the civil service and the judiciary. So this is one of the examples of what the issue was at that time. If you want to Africanize them, let my own Igbo people too be sharing in that. Not only that, all Yoruba people would enjoy that benefit. So as it was destroying the movement and the progress that Yoruba people were making in the party, he gradually started to brand and promote his people. And the greatest weapon he was using in his was his media house. And if you go to page 141 of Awolowo's biography, okay, don't let me read that because it's a long one. But let me just quickly say, so Dr. Azikiwe started to disclose the success of his people, and there were constant editorials about people who went abroad and who graduated. Let me give 4 examples. Number 1. Igbo young man to sail to UK and is heading, this is the heading of the front page story on September 23 of 1938. The young man is Mr. Dada Wachuku, now Speaker of the Nigeria's House of Representatives. 14th West African student, 10th Nigeria, 8th Igbo in USA. Another front page was on this story, and this man was Mr. Nwafo Orizu, now Senator of the Upper House. Now, another editorial says Igbo medical student passes exam in first class honor. This also took the front page on June 26 of 1940. The doctor is Dr. S.O. Eguatu. So these were part of the things that were going on at that time. So he was really getting very happy that his people were now kind of coming up and was now building them to kind of join in the nationalist struggle. Zik also started the name-shaming agenda and started a kind of propaganda to brand himself as the face of the struggle. He wanted Nigeria to see him as the leading nationalist, same as Kenyans were looking at Jomo Kenyatta, and same as Tanzanians were looking at Nyerere at that time. This was a leading, these were the leading faces of the struggle in their prospective regions across Africa. In Ghana too, they were looking up into Nkrumah, and in Congo, they were looking up to Lumumba. In South Africa, they were looking up to Nelson Mandela, and in Guinea, they were looking up to Sekou Touré. So he wanted to be that face for Nigeria, but it was very complicated in Nigeria because there were a lot of nationalists, and it was hard for one person to emerge as the face. So you can't kind of throw away people like what was this guy that moved the motion for independence? You can't throw away their influence. You can't throw away the influence of Zik. You can't throw away the influence of NYM nationalists. You can't throw away the influence of Eyoita. So it was very, very hard in Nigeria for one man to emerge and become like the face of the struggle for everybody. Now, one of the issues that got Awolowo really, really upset, and he started to get very angry with Zik, well, it had to do with the kind of friendly match. You know, this was okay. Before that time, there was something else that happened. So you see, Yoruba land was a blessed land. It's a very, very, almost everything grew. So you see in the north, they can grow groundnuts there. That's the major cash crop, and they can grow corn. Then in the east, they had palm oil and they had coal. But you see, in Yoruba land, everything grew there. Cocoa was there, palm oil was there, rubber was there. They had citrus plantations there. They had the coastal business was going on there in Lagos. So almost everything grew in Lagos. So this was making the British government not happy. So now the British government now decided that since palm oil had local use in Nigeria, that they will not be exporting palm oil from Yoruba land anymore, because Yoruba land already exports rubber, Yoruba land already exports cocoa, Yoruba land already exports large timber. So there's no need for them to now still be competing with Niger Delta for palm oil. So they were like, okay, you guys use your palm oil for local use and we'll only import the other things. So of course, the Yoruba people were not happy with this, and they started to get upset with the government. But Zeke was happy, and he was publishing in his article. And let me read that. This was what was said in his in the pilot. The pilot was his book. It says the measure by the government is fair. Instead of reducing the whole country into poverty, only the Western province will be affected. So they can switch over to other avenues to make body and soul alive. So this was, in fact, this was what was used against him when he wanted to now become premier of Western region. Like, have you forgotten all the things you used to say? So why are you coming here now to tell us you want to be our premier? How is that going to happen? You know? So before I go on, because I don't want to dwell on this too much, but I want us to understand one of the reasons why I'm doing this is not because I have anything against Igbos, but I want you, my Yoruba people, to understand why Awolowo did a lot of things he did. Stop thinking of him as a tribalist. He was very uncomfortable about a lot of things going on, and he felt like if Yoruba people did not bring themselves together and spoke as a bloc, there's going to be danger. Now, let me give an example of something that happened. There was a friendly match that happened between Christ the King College in Onitsha and St. Gregory's College of Lagos. So this was a kind of friendly match, and you know, friendly match used to happen. It still even used to happen in the 90s when we were still in school in Nigeria. Now, Onitsha defeated Lagos 5-4. Now, this is just a normal match between school students. And I mean, people just like, you know, the people that cried. The people like, but I mean, Zeke now turned it to a kind of interesting propaganda and claimed that it was because Igbos were superior to Yoruba people. That was why they defeated them in that friendly match. He took time to give a grandiose description of how they journeyed from Onitsha to Lagos and painted the match to look like it was war. Let me read it. I think I put it, you know, he even put Ife, the spiritual center of Yoruba. Let me read it. Let me read it so you can get, it's still, so you see, it said, this is Awolowo now talking in his book. He said on August 24, 1940, the Christ the King, okay. So an article written by Zeke himself, published on the front page of the pilot and entitled Football Iliad, 1940 edition, shocked many people. It was a big step forward in an insidious campaign which had gone on for more than 2 years on the pages of the pilot. A football team composed of students of the Christ the King's College, Onitsha, came to Lagos to play a win-the-war football match against St. Gregory's College. Now, the Christ the King team of Onitsha defeated St. Gregory's team by 5-4. To the ordinary man in the street, let alone the highly sophisticated elements, there was nothing extraordinary or unusual in one school or college defeating another in a game of soccer. But not so with Dr. Azikiwe. He saw in the sporting exploits and triumph of the team from Onitsha the inherent superiority of the Easterners over their opponents, and he went to the very great pains to establish these facts by means of careful choice of words and emphasis. The extras of the article are this below. So this was what Zeke wrote in the pilot in August 1940. So it says, and then to think of the great combination of the Spartan heroes who crossed her lordy Niger, journeyed through the good earth of Benin, hurried across the domains of Oshemawe, of Ondo, of the Atanla of Owo, of the Owa of Elisha, of the Oni of Ife, of the Alake of Abeokuta in their invasion of these islands. Who but heroes of mighty brawn and exceptional developed brain would have dared to make this invasion and to succeed in carrying to the river Niger home the golden fleece of intercollegiate soccer championship of the eastern and western provinces. Yet they came to Lagos, they saw the irresistible defense put up by their opponents, and they conquered impressively, convincingly, and were graceful even in victory. Could their achievements be parallel? Would it not be better for me to leave the answer to the lap of the gods? So this was okay, I'm sorry, excuse me. So you see, this was a friendly match, right? But when Zeke would publish it, he gave this grandiose warlike conquest. Was even, you see, to go from Onitsha to Lagos, you are not going to go through Ife. I don't know how the roads were then, but he, in his word, he was just saying, no, they crossed so they were making it look like a warrior invasion, crossing other kingdoms, conquering other kingdoms. He says, oh, they crossed Benin and went into the domains of Oshemawe of Ondo, of Otenla of Owo, of Owa of Elisha, of Oni of Ife. And this, it takes brawn, developed brain. So this was a football match. So you can see that almost anything, it was becoming like a childish kind of tribalism, to a point that almost everything to paint the Igbo man as superior, Zeke would jump at it. So this was exactly where tribalism came from. It didn't really come from Awolowo. And this was the foundations of the problems that the South has had, and that's always given the North an advantage over Ross. Now, this thing really got Awolowo very upset. You know, and so he gave the writing deeper interpretations of Zeke looking forward to days Igbos would invade and take over Yoruba land. His comment a few years later made this fear more palpable when he had a speech in 1949 claiming that the martial prowess of the Igbo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, but also to adapt themselves to the role of preservers. He started the speech by claiming that God of Africa has specifically created the Igbo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. And to now even take the quote verbatim, word for word, and I'm going to read the quote out again. So it says, so this was read in the Igbo Federal Union of 1949. It said, it will appear that the God of Africa has specifically created the Igbo nation to lead the children of Africa from the bondage of the ages. The martial prowess of the Igbo nation at all stages of human history has enabled them not only to conquer others, but also to adapt themselves to the role of preserver. The Igbo nation cannot shrink in its responsibility. Politically, you have seen with your own eyes how you were disenfranchised by the British. The Igbo nation has never been represented in the executive council. Economically, the Igbo nation has labored under onerous taxation measures without sufficient social amenities to justify same. So these were all the things that were going on at that time. And these things made Awolowo grow very uncomfortable, especially when in 1946, Nigeria, the National Youth Movement, started to fight and to force the British government to start to prepare Nigeria for independence. So they wanted to reverse, Nigeria was one country, but the British has always seen the North as different from the South. So as they were preparing for independence, they now decided that they had to reverse that. That was what led to the Authoritas Constitution of 1946 that broke Nigeria back into two regions. So there was the northern region and then there was the southern region. So in the southern region, Zeke was planning to use his influence and the NCNC influence to be the dominant political power. But people like Awolowo now started fighting and saying, no, we will not let this happen because we don't trust Zeke to be the leader of a southern bloc politically. That was what led to the Macpherson Constitution 5 years later. This was in 1951 that now eventually broke Nigeria into three regions. That was what led to the creation of the northern region and the eastern region and then the western region. And that was how it remained up until independence. And of course, up until 1962, when the Midwest region was created. So you can see how things were evolving at that time. Nigeria has been a hotbed for potential disaster about to happen. They have put a lot of people that do not think the same way, that are not comfortable with each other, that do not trust each other in the same boat. As the Igbos were fighting the Yoruba people, the Northerners were positioning themselves not only to dominate the people of the Middle Belt that didn't want to be with them, but to eventually either dominate the whole of the South or to remain as an independent bloc. So these were all, you see, shortly before Nigeria was created, the ultimate goal of the North, of the Sokoto Caliphate, was to bury the Quran in the sea. So their intent has always been to conquer the South. In fact, when Uthman Dan Fodio completed his jihad, his intent, the short days of his life, right? The short days on planet Earth. The last fight he fought, the last war he fought was with the TV people. And in that war, the arrow that killed him came from there, a poisoned arrow. The TV people were great hunters, and in fact, they were great elephant hunters. They could use poisoned arrows to bring down an elephant. So if you see that, if the arrow now touched someone, you can see the danger it could do. But now, shortly before his death, he broke the empire, the caliphate, into three capitals. And then there was one capital that was supposed to hold on the Hausa lands and to also take what you call the bastard states, the pagan belt of the Middle Belt. Then there was another capital that was created at Gwandu, and this capital was given to his brother, Abdul-Dakar Danfodio. Gwandu was supposed to conquer Yoruba land. It was supposed to conquer Nupe land. It was supposed to conquer all the way till they got to the coast. And then there was another one that was given to Madibo Adama in the Eastern Bloc. It was supposed to conquer the River Benue region. So you can see that if you look at those places that I've mentioned, you can see that I just drew for you the map of Nigeria. And this was done in 1817, about 70 years before the British arrived. Before the British amalgamation, excuse me. So you can see that the British design of Nigeria was not even first coined by them. It was first coined by the Fulani people. So you see, all these things have been placed. Now, all these people that my own ancestors were fighting wars to resist, all of a sudden the British came. Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Bunga. Check your message. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes. On this Twitter, yeah. You can continue, sir.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Yes, give me a minute to check. Oh, okay. No problem. So you see, that was what happened, and the rhetoric grew louder, and it started to make the Nigerian youth movement very uncomfortable. So they realized that Zeke was getting too reckless, and Awolowo pressured for him to be summoned for party disciplines. So, like, because we are going to be rounding up soon, I don't want to go into details about all the things that happened, but eventually the party broke. And now when the party now broke, this was shortly before now Nigeria came. So you can see that that bitterness already existed between them. So in the last hours, when Nigeria was about to get its independence, the British was very uncomfortable with the success that was going on in the South. Now, Awolowo has been able to evolve Western region into an industrial base. So Western region was no more a place where you can take raw materials to England and then bring it back to Nigeria. So what they used to do then, they will carry cocoa to England and then they will bring the end products back. They will carry palm oil to England and bring back soap, margarines, and all these things. They would carry timber to England and bring back wood materials, bring stuffs. They will carry cotton to India and bring back fabrics. Now, what Awolowo started doing, he started to now bring in he started to bring in American companies and started to create industrial layouts. He created the industrial layout at Ikeja. He created the industrial layout at Apapa. He created an industrial layout at Benin. And then he created the Oluyole Industrial Estate. And now you see all these companies that you saw in Ikeja. He started to bring them. Cadbury, Coca-Cola, Guinness, all those stuffs. Now, most of the things that were now going to England, they started to now become homegrown industries. So much that the things that were now being made in Nigeria, in Western region, was not even outshining what they used to bring. Because the Guinness that is made in Nigeria is better than the Guinness that is made in Dublin, where it came from. Guess what? The Guinness that they create in Nigeria, it's sold at a higher price than the Guinness that comes from any part of the world because of the raw materials that were used, that were homegrown and local products. So you can see that this is where the problem came for the British when they were about to leave. It was the same thing in the Eastern region. Zeke has now been able to go get his people educated. They are building what you call African socialism. So Okpara that came after too started building stuff. So they saw that potential. They now realize that for them to make sure that Nigeria will still be a place they can exploit, they have to put their partners in the dual mandate in power so that these people will frustrate any attempt for Nigeria to become an industrial nation. That was why they made sure power went to the north. That was why they made sure they groomed Ahmadu Bello. And that was why they made sure that all the progress that was being made in the south was immediately reversed. So you can see that shortly after they left, it just became tensions. And first of all, when Awolowo went to meet Zeke and said, okay, let's form an alliance in the South, Zeke refused because of all these tensions that I've spoken about that they've had since the NYM days. So he rather went with the North, especially when they promised him that he would be in charge of the military. And so you remember that he wanted to use the military to overrun Nigeria in 1964 when he noticed that the North was trying to break away from the NCNC and build a new political base with Akintola. So the person that stopped it at that time was the dominant Ademolegun, who was the military brigadier in northern region and who was controlling the northern part of the military at that time. And of course, the Sardana greatly trusted him. That was why he had no problem with what was going on at that time. So I don't know. Do you want me to break down what happened in the first coup? Why the first coup happened and the situations?
Of course you can.
Okay. So when this thing started to happen, right? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when these things started to happen and the problems started, so the North started to now cause a lot of regression. Every progress they see, they weren't comfortable. Igbos were being successful because a man emerged then. His name was Sir Louis Ojukwu. He became the president of the stock exchange. He started to kind of the public corporations started to emerge, and Igbos were major shareholders of public corporations. The Northerners did not like this. So they now were doing everything to now kind of destroy the Igbo political base and to now move in and close in and build friendship with Akintola, which made the Zik and NCNC very upset because the gentleman agreement they always had was that the Fulanis will dominate the north and the Igbos or Southerners will dominate the South. So the arrangement was that Northerners should not get involved in politics of South Nigeria. Southerners should not get involved in politics of Northern Nigeria. But the moment they started to now get involved and started to now kind of work with Akintola to checkmate the South, and then they now did something. The leader of opposition then was Fani Kayode's dad, Remi Fani Kayode. They brought him away from NCNC. He left with all his followers, and then they joined with Akintola and joined with the North. And that totally destroyed NCNC's political base in Southwest and now totally limited them to the Southeast. Now, they were trying to influence the Ijaw and Igbo tensions, which was being led by Adakaboro. These were part of the things that were happening then that was leading to a lot of ethnic cleansing going on in Nigeria. From 1960 to 1966, the MPC government was very, very ruthless. First of all, they did a lot of ethnic cleansing in the Middle Belt among the TV people. They did a lot of ethnic cleansing among the Yoruba people when they started to protest against the arrest of Awolowo and the imposition of Akintola, who they believed was brought into power through elections. And they were about to now start invading the southeastern region because Michael Akpara was also a very difficult man and was giving them a lot of problems. These were the situations that were going on when the first coup happened. And now, to talk about the first coup, give me a minute. Let me catch my breath and get a cup of water. So before I go into the first coup situation.
All right. All right.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me very well? Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
The first coup in Nigeria happened in January of 1966. And the major brain behind this coup was a man called Ifeajuna. Ifeajuna was ADC to Maimalari, the most powerful soldier in Lagos. He wasn't the most senior, but he was the most powerful. He was far from, actually, I wouldn't say he was actually far from the most senior. Like he was, he was, but he had access to all the arsenals in the region. This was why it was easy for Ifeajuna to take arms from the barracks with his forged signatures. If Nigeria was invaded by a foreign country, it would have been Maimalari that would have stopped it because he had access to all the arsenals and all the barracks, especially in the Lagos area. So the most powerful man in terms of access to ammunition and all was Maimalari, whereas the most powerful man in the north was Ademulegun, who was, of course, protecting the Sardauna. So that was why every time they told him that there was going to be a coup, he was never scared because he knew that for as long as Ademulegun was alive, nobody can get rid of him. So this was one of the reasons why the first person they had to kill for this coup to be successful in the north was Ademulegun, but unfortunately his wife a pregnant woman too was killed, was gunned down, who she was sleeping in bed next to him at that point. So the final night before the coup, there was a party in Maimalari's house. Maimalari was the commander of the second brigade in the Nigerian army in Lagos, and he planned a party because he was getting married. I think he was having a second wife, but he was bringing a new wife from Kano. So most of the ADCs, Ifeanyi was at that party, and they were all there. And of course, they were planning that all these soldiers they were going to be killed the next day. So it was somewhat a kind of things you see in the movie, right? Like a mafian story. Here you are partying with these people, but you know that the next day there are people you intend to mark and to kill. So because at that party, most of the targets for elimination were present. This included Ironsi, who was the general officer commanding of the army, Colonel Mohammed, who was the chief of staff, and Yakubu Gowon. Yakubu Gowon would eventually become a future head of state, but at that time he was the commander of the 2nd Battalion at Ikeja. So now, the next morning, the coup plotters met at Ifeanyi's house in Lagos. Now, some of those who met there include Humphrey Chukwuka, Christian Anuforo, and Christian Anuforo was a staff officer at the army headquarters. And then Ademoyega was the one who wrote Why We Struck. They all met at the Ifeanyi's house. And then there was also Captain Ganiyu Adeleke. He was a new recruit whose services was greatly needed because he commanded a few ground troops. So the planning for the coup started in August of 1965. 4 leaders were chosen to plan the coups in different regions. So the person that was told to go and plan the coup at Ibadan and to get rid of Akintola and Fani Kayode was Umbo Botsi. Nziogu was the one that was tasked to get rid of them in the north, and Ifeanyi was the one that was going to plan the one in Lagos. Now, the coup in the north was termed as Operation Damisa. And Damisa, I believe, means leopard skin. And it was termed so because they believed that the leopard did not change its spots. So it was planned by Nziogu, and another person helped him. That was Major Timothy Onwatwegu and Captain Gabriel Ude. So he set up a camp at a bush not far from Madu Bello's residence at Kaduna. And most of the soldiers with him did not even know at that time that they were going to be part of a bloody coup. So they had thought it was kind of a mock exercise. So what had surprised them, though, was that they were armed with heavy artillery, including rocket launchers. So while they were going out for the mock training, or for what they thought was a mock training, they didn't understand why they were having all these kind of heavy equipment. Now, when they got to the Sadana's lodge, they met 4 police constables. So, of course, a combat emerged by the gate, and Izugu's boys killed them. So this was when kind of reality dawned on the soldiers that, wait, this is direct, this is serious wahala going on. We are actually engaging in a physical exercise. And if you understand how the military works, it's a command structure. So if your senior gives you a command, even if it tells you to kill your mother, you have to follow commands. You can't turn down command. Now, when Nziogu ordered people to fire the Sardana's house, many of those guys got scared. And if you were, Amadu Bello was the most powerful man. So there has never been anybody as powerful as Amadu Bello in Nigerian politics, not before or after him. Nobody wielded his kind of power in a democratic environment, So to say that they should gun him down in his house was a very scary thought. One of the people that were ordered, his name was Oyegoke. He dropped his gun and started to run away towards the bush. By that time, they said he was actually peeing on himself. That was how scared he was, And Nziogu rushed after him, shot him, pinned him down, and then riddled him with bullets, cursing him out as a coward. So now, after he did that, people got kind of brazened up because now you are between the devil and the deep blue sea. It's either you obey Nziogu's orders or you die yourself. So when he ordered the shelling of the house, they started to shell down the house with rocket grenades until the house caught fire. Now, Nziogo and a couple of soldiers conducted room-to-room search looking for the Sardauna, and they eventually found him in a room with his wives. His wives were trying to cover him up. So Nziogo pulled out the Sardauna and gunned him down. He shot him and killed him. And he also killed one of his senior wives, Hafsatu, as she was trying to protect her husband. Now, the situation also at Ibadan. Nwobosi arrived at Ibadan, and at that time, he was Commandant Field Artillery at Abeokuta. So Ifeanyi brought him to be a part of the coup, and along with him were people of his unit like Ibolegbu and IGBOHO. So they planned the Ibadan part of the coup from Abeokuta, and from there moved to Ibadan. So the first thing they did when they got to Ibadan is that they went to the telephone exchange and electricity corporation, and then they shut down all means of communication and energy. So there was no light and there was no access to calling the phone in Ibadan at that time. Now, the first place they went was Remi Fani-Kayode's house. There was a lot of thugs in his house at that time, but the soldiers were able to overpower them. Then they went into Fani-Kayode's room, tied him up, and pulled him in a Land Rover to show them the way to Akintola's house. So, host, how many more minutes do we have?
Hello? Well, we can add additional 15 minutes or so. Just
okay. Okay, all right. So now, prior to the time they got there, so it was Akintola that was now showing them the way to it was Akintola that showed them the way to Fani-Kayode that showed them the way to Akintola's house. So Akintola was prior to the time they got there, Fani-Kayode's wife had already called Akintola and told them that they've come to take the husband. He already knew that this was going to happen, so he already bought a gun. And he was already kind of practicing. He also got in touch with the commandant of the Ibadan barracks then. His name was Akahan. So, he had gone to the Ahmadu Bello and he told him at that point that maybe they should leave Nigeria, relocate to Niger State for a while until tensions died down. But Ahmadu Bello didn't take it serious because it felt like so long as Ademolegun was in the north, there's no way they would do a coup, So, so for as long as this was what was going on, Ademolegun was from Ondo State, and he was really, he had the north in his palm. You couldn't do a coup. He had, so the powers that Mamlari had in the south was the same powers he had then, and he was very, very loyal to the Sardauna. That was one of the reasons why when Zeke told the military to take over Nigeria in 1964. Ademolegun was part of the people that stood up and said no, that they're not going to take over the country, that the politicians can still go on. So he had always suspected that in the north, Ademolegun had always suspected Nziogo that he was going to do a coup. So he has always told him that he should not do any mock training close to the Sardauna's house anymore. And they marked a distance away from that house, So Ademolegun was the one that had been protecting for a while. So Nziogo now decided that if he was going to do any successful coup in the north, the first person he should get rid of was even Ademolegun before he went for the Sardauna. And that was exactly what they did. Ademolegun was so much of a decorated officer that he was the head of security to McPherson, who was Governor General from 1950 to 1954. So now you see, Nziogo was at the Sardauna's house when people went to Ademolegun's house. Someone else was delegated to go to his house and get rid of him, and his name was Timothy Onwatuegu. So he had a Land Rover, and a group of soldiers were with him as they went to the house. His house was heavily guarded, but at the time of that coup, many of those that were guarding him had been compromised and they were part of the coup. So they made it easy for Onwatuegu to be able to to kind of come to the house. So it just shocked Onwatuegu suddenly to Ademolegun to see Onwatuegu in his room. He was there, he was in his boxers and singlet, and his wife was next to him. So, I mean, it was like, what are you doing here? So, Onwatuegu asked him to dress up and come with him. And this, of course, kind of affected his ego. And he shouted back, "Are you mad? Who are you to give me orders?" Because, of course, you know, he's an Ondo man. Apart from the fact that he was a senior ranking man in the military, Ondo, I mean, if you're Yoruba, you will know the kind of pride that an Ondo man has. So he found it very ridiculous that a junior officer is giving him an order. So he reached out for his drawer and was trying to pull out a pistol. And he knew he could not overpower the soldiers that came from him, but he preferred to die than to face the humiliation that a junior officer ordered him around. So as he reached out for his drawer to pull out his pistol, Onwatuegu opened fire on him and killed him. He opened fire and killed his wife, Nurse Latifa, and she was heavily pregnant at that time. She was 6 months pregnant. So the older kids, they rushed to the servant quarters and they were there until the soldiers left. And of course, after they left, they came over and they saw the dead body of their parents, which of course would have been a very sad sight to see. Now, when reports was given to Unziogu, he himself was not happy to hear of the death of Ademolegun's wife, because Unziogu was a frequent guest in that house and his children were very fond of him. So he obviously wanted Ademolegun dead because the coup can never be successful in the north while it was under his command. But because he could just wake up and mobilize any barracks to reverse the coup. But he wasn't happy that the wife was killed. But of course, the people now fought him back that, okay, if you can also kill the Sardauna's wife, why do you have a problem that Ademolegun's wife was killed? So you see, so those were the things that were going on in the north. So the north was successful in the coup, but the real coup was going on in Lagos. And the man that was in charge of the Lagos part of the coup was Ifeajuna. So he had the largest task of the coup regarding people to eliminate. And one of his targets was Tafawa Balewa, who was the prime minister at that time, and Okotie-Eboh, who was the minister for finance and one of the major financiers of NCNC, before he now started to kind of drift and to join with Balewa and Akintola. In fact, he was part of the people that Akintola was looking up to help finance his new breakaway party from Action Group, which was the new NNDP, which was like a reincarnation of Albert Macaulay's party, and which would now be an alliance party with the North that forms the NNA, New Nigeria Party. So the NNA, I don't remember what the A stands for, but these acronyms were New Nigeria Party. So now, the soldier who led the delegation to Okotie-Eboh's house at the command of Ifeajuna was Ezedigbo. So he placed a roadblock at the Onikon roundabout and placed Onyacha in charge of that roadblock. And then he went with Fola Ojewole, another soldier, to the house of the prime minister. Now, Balewa did not keep a lot of security details. So when Ifeajuna entered the building, he had all the guards disarmed. A guard dog barking, he killed the dog, shot the dog and killed it. So when Ifeajuna forced the door open, the prime minister was already awake and walking towards the door. He was in a white dress. So Ifeajuna told him that he was under arrest and wanted to march him off. So of course, Balewa, usually they said he was a calm person. He never loses his composure. So he was just begging Ifeajuna that can he be allowed to say his last prayers, and then he would go with them. And of course, they agreed. So after prayers, he followed the Ifeajuna, and when they got back to the roundabout, Okotie-Eboh had already been arrested from his house. He was tied to the truck and brought to the roundabout. The Prime Minister, Balewa, was in Ifeajuna's car. Ifeajuna had a red Mercedes-Benz. Then the major target in Lagos was went after. The real major guy. You remember I said that the main guy that they had to get was Maimalari. So much as the North, the success of the North depended on getting Ademulego, the success of the South also depended on getting Maimalari. So now it was important to get rid of him, or the coup will go nowhere in Lagos. He oversaw the strongest armory and could mobilize an army to reverse the coup if he made it to any barracks in Lagos. So he was commander of the Southern Brigade at Apapa and had all powerful blocks under him. So Mamilari was in charge of the fighting forces in Lagos. He was in charge of the field artillery. He was in charge of the armored mechanized squads. So, I mean, he could mobilize an entire brigade and even raise an army against foreign country, like I said earlier. So if Nigeria was under siege at any time, that was the man that would rise to the occasion. So saying, he was on top row of major targets that needed to be eliminated. And the soldier that was sent to get him was Donatus Okafor. So he was sent to Mamlari's house. He was living at Ikoyi at that time to get rid of him. I don't remember. Remember that I said that he was having a party in his house the previous night. So, I mean, that morning he was just fresh from his marriage to a new wife and all that. So there were some tensions before Okafor was able to get into Maimalari's house. Then he saw that on time. He was looking from his window and he saw that these guys had come and he knew that they were coming to get him. So he rushed to the back of his house, jumped through the fence, and was running away towards the damn barracks in his pajamas. He didn't have any shoes on. So as he was running, he was ducking the bush. All this was happening at night, around 2 a.m., 3 a.m., at midnight. So he would duck in the bushes and dodge when he sees a car coming because he didn't know which was what. So as he saw a car coming, he ducked. Fortunately or unfortunately for him, that was Ifya Juna's car. And at that time, he was coming from the prime minister's house. So he was behind a bush. So when he saw the Benz and he saw the number, he said, "Oh, that's Ifya Juna's car." So he jumped out and he waved to stop the car. So Ifya Juna stopped and came out of the car. So he was trying to explain to him that some people came to his house and wanted to arrest him, and they were trying to kill him. So he was trying to tell Ifeajuna to please take him to the nearest barracks so that he can trace the bastards that were coming from him and then finish them off in the morning. But as he was now walking to Ifeajuna's car, he saw the prime minister in the car. Then he looked back and saw all the trucks, saw Kotiebo, saw everybody in the car. That's how he realized that he had walked into an ambush. And Ifeajuna was his ADC. So, of course, he didn't even cross his mind that Ifeajuna could be part of the people that wanted him dead. The previous night, they were partying together. He was the one that actually organized the party where he was celebrating his new wife. So it wouldn't cross his mind that this same guy was actually marking him for extinction the next day. But of course, by the time he realized that, it was too late. So Ifeajuna cocked his gun and told him to say his last prayers. And so saying, he shot Maimlari and killed him. And all this was happening while the prime minister was watching in the car. I think we have gone. Unfortunately, this is a long historical narrative. I wanted to talk about the first coup. Then I wanted to talk about the Biafra Civil War. Then I wanted to talk about Muritala. Then I wanted to talk about Babangida before 1999 Constitution. So I don't think it's something we can finish today, Babami. So I don't know what you have in mind. Yeah.
Maybe we can just end there. We'll just ask anybody if anybody has any question, you can signify. I will bring you up. Maybe you just have a short contribution too, so that we can round up the room. Well, I don't think nobody is signifying. Mr. Bunka, thank you very much. Ẹ ṣé gidi gan, ẹ ṣé gidi gan. Kò easy at all. In fact, gbogbo ní tẹ́ ti sọ yìí, ẹ ti cover a lot of years so. Ẹ ṣé gan. I will end the room now, sir. Maybe we set
Okay, thank you.
we'll set another room for part 2. Maybe
Okay, nice.
we will inform you anyways. So thank you, sir.
No wala.
Yeah, thank you, sir. All right, sir. All right, everyone. Bye bye. Ẹ ṣé gan.
ṣé gan ní fún gbogbo ẹ̀yin tí ẹ bá wa darapọ̀ mọ́ program yẹn. Ẹni tó ń béèrè pé bàbá wa Stephen pé when are you coming back? Ẹ lọ subscribe sórí Think Yoruba First lórí Twitter. Ìjàngbara tá ń jà media gbogbo wa náà la gbọ́dọ̀ get involved so that we can push all our narratives, our message. Self-determination is not a crime. There's a lot of history tí wọ́n ti fi bà ayé ara wọn jẹ́ tí wọ́n jẹ́ ká mọ̀, and that's the reason why we are doing all we are doing to make sure that everybody knows what is going on. Even as tired as we are, we will keep pushing the message, and that's what is all about, the media. So bá tún ṣe máa ń lọ lálẹ́ tó bá tún di ọ̀la, we continue the journey again. Bí ṣe ń gbọ́ wọn náà kidnap ọba dáńkẹ́ wà lórí Yorùbá Wuyi, and I think the news is already circulating. Kan náà àwọn ọba kan nílẹ̀ Yorùbá bí abálẹ̀ dẹ̀ ni only God knows, you know. Kọ́lọ́n jẹ́ kó rí kábíyèsí níbi tó bá wà. I think it's ọba Onírè or something of such. So ọba tí wọ́n ti gbé ọba lọ báyìí nísìnyí. Ẹ bá lọ sórí page Yorùbá Wuyi. Then gbogbo àwọn tó ń gbé fake news pé wọ́n ti mú Ìgbòho nonsense. Look at the Colonial got different headlines or YouTube, all this nonsense, whatever. I don't know about Oba Onire of Ire Kingdom has been kidnapped. That's about 2 hours ago. The news in Jade lórí Yoruba Wuyi. That's all. KOIKIMEDIA, bringing the world closer to your doorstep. Bye for now.